Filmmaker in Focus is a project of the Maine Outdoor Film Festival.
This summer, Portland, Maine hosts the 2022 Maine Outdoor Film Festival. 3 weekends of outdoor film shown outdoors at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, the Eastern Promenade, and Apres. So, whether you spend your day on the trail, ocean, in the mountains, or enjoying Portland's many cultural and culinary options, we'll see you at MOFF in the evenings. Each night will feature a shorts block or a feature-length film related to outdoor adventure or conservation from some of Maine and the world's best adventure filmmakers. Mark your calendars. Advance tickets go on sale April 1st.
I'm originally from New Jersey, so my parents moved here when I was 7 years old. I just turned 8. Wasn't born within the state's boundaries, so I'm officially not a Mainer, but I grew up here for sure. I started surfing when I was in high school, and it was brutal at first with like really shitty wetsuits and bad boards. My friend's grandmother would drop us off, and then it would be like blowing a gale. She'd be like, okay, we'll see you in an hour and a half. And like I think back on it now, and I'm like, oh my God, like what the hell? Yeah, it was crazy. But it was catching waves on the equipment that we had when you went. There wasn't like forecasting or anything. And that day was the day I caught my first real wave. The first time you actually glide across the face and go down the line, and you're just standing there, and you're not in control at that point. You're at the mercy of gravity and everything happening right for you, and you just happen to be there in this moment. It's undescribable. It's totally undescribable. There's an experience of awareness of the moment that probably all human beings are seeking, whether we realize it or not. And it's a way to get that. And I don't think there's very many ways to get that in this life. But it puts you there, and you have to be present for it because you are at the mercy of nature. It's a heightening of awareness that I think is the only way that I could explain it now without even realizing that I was explaining surfing. But that's what it is. Your awareness is heightened. And more than anything, that's probably what it's all really about as far as why we all love it so much. We're also crazy about it. Can I take a break for a second?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool, because I'm gonna fill up this is a whole operation here. I've got space heaters, and my pump is broken, so I've been filling it manually. It's like I'm in Maine, it's the winter, and I feel like you're supposed to have a cold shop. I think it's like some dues of life that you're supposed to pay as a Mainer. This space where I'm at right now was my stepfather's. This was Gary's barn that he built with his father. Lo and behold, I've got this amazing space that I've been able to use to build surfboards. Being in Maine, it was really hard to get access to lots of different boards. And so friends were like, you should make your own. And I was like, no, it's way too much I don't know about. There's no way. And then I can't remember if I had a moment where I was like, I'm just gonna go for it, but I just kept thinking about it and kept thinking about it. So I ordered some blanks and I just did it all by hand. I had no power tools. And the first few came out okay. The reason I even tried this in the beginning was because of all the experience I had with carpentry and renovation work, and because I had surfed for 20 years prior. And I've always been a trial and error kind of person. And that's the best way. You learn your best lessons from making mistakes. There isn't one specific example. My whole life has been like that. Well, it's like people telling you what to do and not doing it.
Hello and welcome back to Filmmaker in Focus. I'm Maddie Roy and today I'm here with Juliette Sutherland. She's the director of the Surfboard Builder. Thank you so much for being with us, Juliette.
Thanks for having me.
So you are quite an experienced local filmmaker. Can you talk to me a little bit about your journey in filmmaking and how you've gotten to the point where you are now?
Yeah, so I studied documentary film and anthropology in college, and I went abroad and worked on a film about conservation, international conservation. So I spent 5 weeks in Malaysian Borneo looking at conservation projects and how it affects the local population and the people who choose to participate in those things. So I was interested in nature, the environment, and the cultural components of those two things. From there, I went to a really small school. So after that, I went to Marlborough College in Vermont. It's like 350 people in the whole school, and it's on an apple orchard on a hill. And it actually doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But after that experience, I just needed to go abroad. So my mom's French, so I moved to Paris, and I spent 2 years living there and met a bunch of international artists. I found this British filmmaker, and we would just work on films together. And then from there, I moved back to the States to start my own business, because after a while, it seemed obvious that I couldn't really do what I wanted to do in France, just in terms of gaining like more of a professional experience. So I came back to the States. I just bought a camera I could afford, started making stuff, built a website, and just like went from there. It was super bootstrappy, and I only bought what I could afford. And yeah, and now I'm really pleased to say that for the past like 4 or 5 years, I don't need to like look for work. Things just like find me, and also being in one place for a while has really helped because I was super nomadic. I was living in Boston, then Nantucket, then Austin, Texas. I did like, I was all over the place. And then I think I've been in Portland for now like 5 years or something. So I've grown my network here, and that feels really good to like, have a community of people. And I've been working with the Women in Film Video New England, and so I was their like person in Maine trying to connect people, and I started a Maine female and non-binary filmmaker group. So again, just trying to like bring underrepresented people together around film, because it is such a male-dominated industry. Wow. And I think because of that too, that's how I sort of gravitated toward documentary film. Like the numbers are a little better in documentary film for women, and I feel like there's just a bit more flexibility in what you can do.
Sure. Most people in your industry would have gone out to like Los Angeles or New York. What made you decide to stay in Portland?
I just have to do things my own way. Anything alternative. I went to an alternative college, and I just can't really be told what to do. I have to figure it out for myself, and yeah, that's kind of what I did. And I never worked for a production company. I would, freelance for them, come on for like a month or a project or something like that, but I just couldn't have that kind of restriction or regularity. I was still very much exploring, and I still am. Recently I've gotten into photography, so
I saw
that's
that.
new.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
you seem like sort of a jack of all trades when it comes to this film industry. I saw you also do you do narratives and documentaries, and then also like promotional and corporate videos. Do you have a personal favorite in terms of what kind of projects you want to work on?
I think I just really love collaborating with artists and makers and people doing interesting things. Like with every project, I learned something new. Even the corporate stuff. I was working for like a venture capitalist firm down in Boston who provides seed money for these biotech companies. That's a world I know nothing about. And so working with them, I was like gleaning all this information. So yeah, I think just the project-based nature of the work I do is really interesting. Getting to work with people, good people. And especially getting to see into the lives and worlds of artists and people who are making things and doing interesting things with their lives.
Yeah. So what led you specifically to the story of the Surfboard Builder? How did you come upon that?
Yeah, so I got into surfing a couple years ago and was just riding like this plastic beginner Bic board, and which was great. I had a lot of volume, and during the pandemic is when I got really serious. You know, my roommate and I would just surf every day because there was nothing else to do. And he had a connection to this surfboard builder and bought a used board from him. And then as I was getting more serious about surfing, I was like, okay, I want my own board. Like, I want to make it unique, make it mine. And so I reached out to him and I was like, could I also film the process? And he was generous enough to be like, yeah, sure. It was during the winter, things were kind of slow. And so he agreed. I think if both of us knew how much work it would have been beforehand, maybe he wouldn't have, but he was super generous with his time and just with his energy. And I was going to make the film about the process of building a board. And I learned a lot, and that's what I love too, is he told me all about the shaping process and all the different components that go into a board and how it affects your surfing style. And also the board was tailored to me, so how do I surf? And, you know, I got a long board, which is meant for like walking down it, so you do certain things to the board to enable that kind of movement. And so I thought I was going to make this film about, you know, the process, the steps in building a board. And of course, the documentary, like, things always change. Yeah. And it just kind of turned out to be about him. Like, he was such an interesting character and his process of learning to surf in Maine. And that's like, you know, an emerging thing. Like, you don't really think of the coast of Maine or surfing in the cold when you think of surfing. So I really liked, those different things. And it really inspired me to get underwater housing and a drone and like all this extra stuff which actually isn't in the film, so maybe I shouldn't say that, but but it like started my interest into like, oh, I just want to film everything about surfing and water and yeah.
Yeah. So you said it was a lot more work than you were expecting. What were some of the biggest challenges about making this?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was, so he lives in York and I'm based in Portland, so right there is like a 2-hour drive, an hour there, an hour back every time we wanted to film. And then his process is very different from other surfboard builders, which I appreciated. So he doesn't do it like full time. It's sort of like his side thing, and because of that, it kind of preserves this artistic approach. So he just, even if I wasn't filming it, I think he is just really generous with his time and really cares about the people he's working for and the boards that he's building, and a lot of attention and detail goes into it. And also his setup is in this like old barn, you know, so there's no running water, no heat, and the materials he was using, like we did fiberglass over it, and then that took a while to dry, and it was always like things get pushed back, life gets in the way, you know, it's just like, yeah, things get prolonged. And so, yeah, I can't remember how many times I went down and filmed, but yeah, just being always ready for things to change and shift. And yeah, that's why documentary takes so long, right? Yeah. It's like, and then the editing process too, I had so much footage, and then finding the story and what I was drawn to in that material. And it turned out to be less about, okay, first we do this and then we do that, and more about like him just going off about life and things like that as he's building this board. Like, those are the things that were interesting to me, was sort of the revealing of his character and who he was as a person in this very unguarded way with me, which was really nice to see. So
yeah, I definitely appreciated his candor. It seems like, and you could definitely see this in your interviews with him, but it seems like all the surfers in the films that I've seen have been sort of like addicted to surfing. And as someone who is a surfer yourself, can you describe like what do you think it is that's like driving that pull to surfing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he's sort of like is going on and on talking about something, and then he's describing surfing, and like, or he's not even in the film too, he's like describing this connection to the moment, and then he's like, oh, I guess that's what surfing is about, like, without even realizing he's describing it. And I think that really is it, is when you're surfing, you have to be aware and connected to the environment around you, because you're in the ocean is constantly changing. There are waves coming, you have to be super aware, there's other people in the water, there's just a lot of components that come together, like the ocean, the board, your body, and you just have to be focused and present. And in a world where we're constantly thinking of other things in the future, in the past, regrets, lists to do, like, it's just so nice to be like, you are here now.
Yeah.
Like, let's just be with this moment right now. And on top of that, being in a beautiful environment and in your body, like doing something with your body. So I don't know if you've had this experience, if you like do yoga or anything, but I've been doing yoga for years, and all of a sudden I was like in this pose, and she was like, okay, like ground down and lift up, and I felt like what that felt like in my body, and I was like, oh, like I get it. And there are moments in surfing too, which is, it's a hard sport to learn. And so there are moments where, like, you know, you're struggling, and then all of a sudden it clicks, and you're like, oh my God, I feel what it's supposed to feel like in my body, and it just glides, and it just feels so good, like, and brings such joy. Yeah, it's indescribable. I don't know, but
well,
I'm sure.
I think you did a pretty good job. I mean, I get it, especially because in this day and age, it's really hard for anyone. Like, our attention spans are so short, so to just fully like be present in the moment is so rare. So I get the draw of that for sure. What is, if you were to, or even if you have any, like, messaging that you try to bring, like, to your work, is there specific stories that you go after that have, like, sort of a common theme, or just whatever inspires you?
Yeah, I think I'm drawn to people with non-traditional lives, so that's why I gravitate towards artists and makers and people who are not in the mainstream, and who also really take it upon themselves to do that courageous thing, which is live the way that they need to live. You know, everyone's like, okay, 9 to 5, like, wake up this, drink this much water, like, eat this, like, vegan is better, you know, like, all this stuff. And then it's like learning how to listen to yourself through all that mess is really hard. And then really courageous to, like, say no to all that and be like, you know what, I know myself, this is what I want to do, and I'm doing it. So I think that's, like, a really beautiful, courageous act, that if we can share those messages with other people, that could inspire them to be like, you know what, like, I've always really wanted to do this, and I'm gonna do it, you know, not needing people's permission. So I think, yeah, I want to normalize those kind of alternative paths, which their common theme is just people learning to listen to themselves and know what makes them happy and brings them joy, and do it.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's great messaging.
Yeah.
What is next for you? Do you have any upcoming projects on the horizon?
So I've been collaborating a lot with dancers lately, actually. So my cousin's a dancer, and I was just on a residency with her working on a dance film. And then there's another local dancer, Heather and Riley. They're a duo. I think her production is Little House is her dance company, and she's on a residency, and I'm going to join her there. And I love movement with my cinematography. Anything that's sort of moving and has that feel of motion and rhythm. Like, I'm a dancer myself, and my editing, I feel like, is very driven by music and rhythm. Yeah, and it's been a dream to work with dancers, so that's coming up. And that's just, you know, personal projects.
Yeah, well, that's exciting stuff. We'll definitely be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. This has been very enlightening. We're excited to see some of your new projects, and definitely, if you haven't seen the Surfboard Builder or really any of Juliette's projects, I'd highly recommend. Thanks so much for joining us on Filmmaker in Focus. This has been Juliette Sutherland.
Thank you.